Hi there, I'm Trish from TrishNewbery.com and welcome to the sew along for the Ninja hood. This Ninja hood, I absolutely love it. It's a unisex pattern, one size. However, I have got a layered file because I found with men, I know I shouldn't gender diversify, but because of the bigger shoulders, on the layers I've just allowed for a wider shoulder width, but generally the one size pattern will fit most. So this has been tested on head circumferences from 54 to 61 centimeters. I'll pop that in inches below. So that's a general adult's good size range. Right, so you're going to need two different fabrics for this. So today I'm sewing the outer in a brushed sweatshirting. It's got minimal stretch, it's maybe got 20% at most, and that's fine. This will fit over the head without any problems. So I'm using that for my outside layer. And then for my scarf layer I'm using, it's around about a 200 weight merino wool. This is a slight rib, only very slight. So you could use the same fabric for both. Just bear in mind that this scarf part, the inner part, is designed to come up and over the nose. So think about breathability, and natural fibres are probably best. But if you live in warmer climates, something like a French terry, or look, even a double brush polyester, something like a DBP will be fine. So it really depends on your end use. For the outer layer, yeah, it's Ponte de Roma is a fabulous, a Liverpool, a scuba as well, something soft like a fleece, or even what I'm wearing here, which is like a Sherpa, would be great too. Just bear in mind with the visor, we're going to be doing a lot of top stitching, so you don't want to get anything that's possibly too dense. Alright, so the other thing you will need is some fusible interfacing, some fuse, which is appropriate for your fabric type, and that's just for our visor, just to make sure it stays up. And before you begin, make sure you apply fuse to one of these visor pieces, and whichever side you apply the fuse to will be the outside or the good side. So bearing that in mind, today I'm going to be sewing with my serger overlocker. We have 6mm, 1/4 inch seam allowances, and there's no need to cut anything off as you sew. We're just going to use our blade for trimming. You're also going to need access to, so you don't have to have a serger, you could use a lightning bolt stitch or a narrow zigzag on a regular sewing machine. You're also going to need a way of top stitching this, so we will need a regular sewing machine. And make sure you put a ball needle into your regular sewing machine so you don't cut any of the fibres of the stretch fabrics as we sew. I think that's about it for housekeeping. 4 threads of matching colour. We need 4 threads to stitch as well as bind, and let's just get straight into it. So I'm going to start off by sewing the visor. So with our visor we've cut out a pair which is 2 mirrors. So one's been cut this way, one's been cut this way. We've applied fuse with heat, pressure and time, and now we're going to place those pieces right sides together, and you'll see a notch in the center we want to match, and all I'm going to do is serge the curved edge together, making sure our beginning and our notches match. Right, so then we're going to turn this so it is wrong sides together, and let's go to our straight sewer, our plain sewing machine. Come to your plain sewing machine and make sure you arrange this so that that fold is right on the very edge. So we're going to be running some top stitching. You can run this at whatever width you prefer. Now bear in mind we've got a 6mm, 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I'm going to sew my first line of top stitching at 5mm, so that's near enough to 1/4 inch, just so I catch the stitches of the seam in here to hold it. And then I'm going to do my next row at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. So all I'm going to do is start stitching on the edge. There's no need to back tack, but make sure you have the fused layer on top. You could press this before you start if you find it easier. I don't. Make sure you have a ball needle here, and make sure you've test stitched on spare fabric and that you've lengthened your stitch length from normal. So just start stitching, and I'm just using the edge of my fabric as a guide here. Okay, so that's my first row. So in my next row I'm going to sew, just using my stitch guides here, so near enough to 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch from the first one. And I'll sew another one. Another one. So I've sewn 4 rows in total, and I'm not going to worry about that last little bit there. You can, if you want to, you can certainly sew another row. Right, so we're going to just put that aside for the time being and move on to the side hood. We're going to start working on the side hood. So for this you'll need the pair of side hoods which look like this. There's 2 mirrors, one's cut out like this and one's cut out like this. And the other piece you're going to need is the centre back hood, which is vaguely triangular. So one end is longer than the other. The shorter end is the neck edge and the longer end is the forehead edge. So just bear that in mind for a moment. Take one of the side hood pieces and place it right sides together to the centre hood piece. So what we want to do is we want the longer edge at the top, and you want to place it at right angles like this. So we're going to sew this long curve together. As you go down the side you will find notches that match, and we want to sew that all the way through to the neck edge. Take the other side hood and place it to the side here and serge that together just like we did the first side. Remember to match that notch. Our hood's starting to take shape, so now we're going to do some top stitching. We're going to top stitch on the centre hood piece, and to do that what you need to do is make sure your seams are pushed towards the centre. You could iron them if you prefer. Now our seams here are 6mm, 1/4 inch, so we want to be able to top stitch just shy of that, so at 5mm or just under 1/4 inch. Now there's no need to back tack, but just make sure that those seams are pushed towards the centre. And now we're going to do that on the other side. So just make sure that seam's pushed towards the centre. Now we're working on the hood facing. So come to your hood facing, and we need to edge finish this edge here. So the edge here is the edge without any of the notches. It's the upper side of this curve. So you could zigzag. I'm going to just serge tidy that edge. Now we're going to put the front of our hood together. So take the hood piece that we've just top stitched and place it right side up, and then take the visor piece and place it right side down. So by that I mean the side that we have fused should be closest to the right side of the hood. At the centre of the visor piece you'll have notches, and those notches should match to the seams we just top stitched. So you're going to need some clips or some pins and just hold that in place like so. And so the reason we do that is because the visor is going to turn over like so, and this will be the right side. So as we come down, there's a notch here, and that notch should match with the starting position of your visor. So hold that in place with a pin on each side. Now, if your fabric shifted because your fuse wasn't appropriate, if you do bring this up slightly, which I did in a couple of my samples, I found that the fuse wasn't stretchy enough. If you're going to bring it up, that's fine. Just bring it up the same amount on both sides. And when you pin, if you use pins, make sure you pin within the seam allowance. Take the facing that you just serge tidied the edge of and place that right side together to the visor and the hood front. So you'll know you're right because when it's right sides together, these curves at the front should match. And so now it's a matter of repinning so that the notches match. So we're creating a sandwich of the hood to the visor, and then to the facing. And now it's a matter of serging those layers together through this long straight edge. You want to make sure when you come to this part here that your it's cut properly. This should actually be in a straight line because we want to make sure that that raw edge is caught within the seam allowance. So I'm just going to tidy that up before I go too much further. It really needs to be accurate. I mean, if it's not, you can always just run over that seam with your plane sewer. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Right, so what I meant by that is just come up to this position here where the visor starts and just double check that you've got all of that caught within the stitching you don't want to end up with a little bit of fabric pointing out. So I've adjusted that, but if you needed to, you could always just run a few stitches with a plain sewer just to recatch any edge. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back to our plain sewer. We're going to do some more top stitching. Turn this facing so that we have wrong sides together, and what will happen is your visor will pop out and extend. Okay, right. So come to this neck edge and push that seam we just created so it's sitting right on the edge, and we're going to top stitch again just like we did before. So make sure that that curve all matches when you start, and we're top stitching at 5mm again, which is just shy of 1/4 of an inch. So we want to, you don't have to, you could do this wider, but I just like to catch that stitching in the top stitching, and most fabrics you're using for this will allow that quite nicely. Okay, so try and stitch nice and straight, and I'm stitching it with the facing on the inside. Now there's no need to fuse the facing, but if you want a really firm hood you could. So I'm coming to the area that the visor is, so just make sure that those layers are separated, as in the visor's pushed all the way out, and continue stitching. We're now going to stitch the facing down, so turn the hood so you're working on the wrong side so you can see the seam we're stitching down, and the edge of the facing here should match to a small notch on the neck edge. And all I'm going to do is stitch this facing down to the hood through the overlocking line. There's my notch there. So go to your iron and give that a press, and then we can move on. We're working on the shoulder seams now, so take one of the fronts and place it right sides together to one of the backs, and match those shoulder seams, and then serge overlock across one and across the other. And now repeat this so you have two the same. So when you have two of them, open them up and place them right sides together. And we're going to sew these together around the outside edge. And there's notches to match as you go. And there's notches to match as you go. I'm going to start sewing these just to one side of the shoulder seam. And at the shoulder seam, generally our seams should face towards the back, but because of the bulk, I'm just going to make sure that they face in opposite directions, just to smooth that transition a little bit. and you'll know the back from the front because the back has double notches. We're now going to do more top stitching, so take that collar and turn it so that it is wrong sides together. And it probably is a really good idea now to go to your iron and press this. And press it so that the seams are right on the outside. Oh, I might have to tighten up my tension. My left needle seems to be a bit loose on my overlocker. Just tighten that up now while I'm thinking about it. So if you do start to have seams show like this, that's usually a left needle issue. So when you've pressed that, now I'm not going to, I'll press it afterwards. When you've pressed that, choose a side that's going to be your good side, and we're going to top stitch. And it shouldn't make a difference, but I always find it does. So just choose the side of the fabric. If you've got a pattern, it'll be obvious which side you like better. And we're going to top stitch around the edge we just sewed, and I'm going to top stitch at 5mm, which is near enough to 1/4 inch, just because that's what I've done for the rest of the garment. And I'm going to start on a shoulder, and I'm going to start on my left shoulder as I wear it. Really should go back and tidy that up, but I'll put that down as a learning curve today. Okay, so top stitching. Take your time. You do want to make sure that that seam's pushed all the way out, and you want it to look really nice. And there is a very subtle in-out curve on each side of this collar. Hopefully you haven't cut that off while you were serging it. So if you haven't done it before, go ahead and iron or press that with your iron just to bed in those stitches. And I'm now going to work on the inner scarf part. So I'm going to go ahead and change my overlocking thread. Here is the inner, I'm going to call it the scarf. It's cut on the fold here with a notch out of it like this. So this is where the nose is going. So what we're going to do is, making sure this is right sides together with the fold like so, we're going to serge tidy or zigzag up here and out to here. Now you don't have to have a perfect triangle, you can certainly angle it off into more of a curve. Now I did this in a contrast fabric, so I have changed my thread on my serger. And that's all you need to do. And we're going to serge this curved edge together, matching the notches. turn this back on itself so we have wrong sides together. Remembering that that notch point was halfway down. So what that means is we want to match the seam on the raw edge. So what you'll see when that seam is in half like that, the nose position is here. So this will be the part that goes up over our nose, and this is the raw edge of the neckline here. We're now going to put this all together, and it's a good idea to tack stitch this before you go to your serger. So what the easiest way to do is start off by putting your collar piece right side up and find the notches on either side of the front. Then take your hood piece and place the edge of the hood, so this is the left side as you wear it, against that first notch. So that's the position of the hood. Now we want to take our inner, so the gaiter or the scarf, whatever you want to call it, and directly down from that little V we stitched, which is the nose opening, so this is the centre front, there's notches on either side as well. So making sure we have the right side, place a notch to that notch there, and pin or hold with the clip. So it's easiest just to start with these, and then the rest sort of all just falls into place. And then the other side starts there. So find the other notch to there. So clearly through the centre front we have a space which is just the scarf inner and the collar, and then the hood starts on either side. So then it's just a matter now of putting these together. There's notches to match as you go. Sometimes it's easier, especially when you're pinning layers like this, to just turn it to the wrong side like this. Just makes it a little bit easier. And after I've pinned the front, what I like to do is pin the back, the centre back, because it just sort of makes everything flow a little bit easier. So come to the centre back of the collar. I'll just mark in that notch there with a pin, and then match that to the very middle of that centre back. So here's our centre back here, and that goes to that notch there. And then find the seam here on the inner, and the seam inner is the centre back as well. So now we've essentially held together the centre front and the centre back. It's really easy to go through and just pin all that, or hold it with clips, whatever you prefer, and there are notches to match as you go. So I'll tack stitch this within the seam allowance, and it's really just so when you overlock it perfectly. You're not going to miss anything out, because there's so many layers to go through here. It's really easy to just have one slide out of place if you're not thinking about it. So just match all raw edges and take your time and tack stitch that into place. And of course with tack stitching, if you just run it in the colour and that you're working in and within the seam allowance, you don't need to remove these tack stitches later. They'll just blend into the overlocking, or they might even just get trimmed off with your blade. So I'm just going to go and check all and then go to my serger and serge it into place. So because I'm using my serger overlocker, what it means is I can go ahead and just use my blade to tidy up any bits that aren't perfect. So for this I'm starting at a shoulder seam, and I'm going to sew it with the inner, or the scarf layer on top. And because I've tack stitched it, it's going to be really straightforward. And certainly I'm going to use my blade a little bit more than I would, just to make sure everything's tidy. So just go around and check that you have caught all that inside edge into place, and just like that, our hood is finished. So thanks for joining me. If you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you again soon for my next sew along video. And thanks for buying my patterns. I really appreciate you supporting a small business. See you again soon.